Pokemon TCG Pocket's newest expansion is upon us, Mythical Island. It launches on the 17th of December in 4 days' time and features over 80 brand new cards. Now, some of these cards have been revealed, some of them have not, most of them have not, but I'm going to run through today the ones we do know about, which I think are notable. There are some very, very cool cards coming our way, and some that are definitely going to have a massive impact on the meta. The first card I want to talk about here is Aerodactyl EX. It is one of the headlining cards alongside Mew and apparently Celebi, which we have yet to see. It's a very interesting card. It's got an amazing ability. At 140 HP for a 2 energy cost and only 1 fighting, 1 colorless for Land Crush, it's a very strong early game card. It's not too much weaker than a Starmie, and it's got a little bit more HP, and its ability, Primeval Law, is actually kind of insane. Now, the ability doesn't clearly specify that it has to be in the active position, which therefore means that this Aerodactyl's ability should take effect from the bench, which makes it very, very powerful. The ability Primeval Law states that your opponent can't play any Pokemon from their hand to evolve their active Pokemon. This is very interesting and actually has a lot of counterplay for things like Weezing, which relies on Koga. For example, if you want to Koga out your active Weezing, switch in a new Coughing, you can't actually evolve that Weezing on the same turn now. That's one of the biggest strategies to getting Weezing on the field. Now you're forced to evolve it on the bench, which severely impacts playability of that deck in some scenario, and that card in some scenarios. Yes, you can still play around this, but that's a pretty big nerf. Now, the next card, which I think looks very interesting, is Vaporeon. It's not even an EX, it's just an art rare, but its ability Washout looks very, very interesting. I think this is going to be a new partner for Blastoise EX personally. I think it's probably not as useful for Starmie EX, but it definitely could assist. Now, this ability, as often as you like during your turn, you can move an energy card from one of your benched Pokemon to your active Pokemon. This is like a permanent passive Lieutenant Surge, which is kind of busted. An example here is, let's say you've got a Tentacruel on field as your starting mon, it's got 2 energies on it, and you've just finished building your Blastoise. Your Blastoise has 0 energies on it, but maybe you've got a Misty. You pop Misty on Blastoise, you hit 2 energies, maybe 3. Okay, you've got a 3 energy Blastoise on field, which is enough to use Blastoise's ability Hydro Bazooka and do 100 damage. But now you can switch Tentacruel out, provided you have an X speed or the new trainer card we'll talk about. You can switch Tentacruel out to your bench, use Vaporeon's ability to transfer Tentacruel's energies to Blastoise, and suddenly you have a fully set up Blastoise dealing 160 damage a turn ready to go, all thanks to this card right here. Mew EX is probably, alongside Aerodactyl, going to be very heavily played and experimented with. This card looks incredible. It's a very vulnerable card, having only 130 HP. It doesn't offer too much in the way of bulk. It does nothing with its basic attack Side Shot, 20 damage. It is effectively useless in a sense. It doesn't do much. It is fine against the Dark deck. But its second attack, for a 3 colorless energy cost genome hacking, allows you to choose one of your opponent's active attacks and use it. Now, this is not like Ditto, where Ditto needs to have the exact energies of the opponent's active Pokemon to use it. So, for example, if you want to copy Articuno, you need 3 water energies. Mew could copy Articuno here with 3 fire energies. It doesn't actually matter, which makes this card very interesting, highly viable competitively, and something that I'm looking forward to experimenting with. Next up is Marshadow, which has a very interesting attack. If any of your Pokemon were KO'd on the previous turn by damage from your opponent, the Marshadow's attack, which does 40 damage, is boosted by 60. The Marshadow will come onto the field and hit your opponent for 100 damage. This doesn't seem overly good, because once you do the 100 damage once, that condition is gone, so you don't do 100 damage the following turn, you're back to 40. However, I think about this in a kind of berserker early game deck where you're running, say, Mankey Promo and Primeape. You're doing a lot of damage early. Your Primeape's already been dishing 100 damage a turn. Let's say your Primeape dies, you bring Marshadow on straight away, bam, another 100 damage. It could be a really, really, really good early game, I guess, you know, all gas, no brakes kind of deck. It could also work with other decks. I mean, it's still a nice card to have on your bench in the back, even if you're running something like Machamp or Marowak EX. This card could be very, very interesting and probably will end up making its way into most fighting type decks, I would say. Another good thing here is it only has a retreat cost of 1, which makes it very easy to use Revenge, switch back out, and maybe bring it in again on the following turn. So you can definitely play a bit of a control game and keep your opponent on the back foot. Over here, we have a Execute, Tauros, and Magmar. I think Execute might be the sleeper of the entire expansion. Magmar's got 80 HP and does a 80 damage attack called Fire Blast. It is kind of like a worse version of Ninetales. However, you could now run this in a Blaine deck alongside Ninetales, and it's quite interesting. So the other Magmar does 50 damage with, I think, Fire Punch. This does 80 damage plus you're forced to discard 2 energies. So it's an interesting card. I don't know if it'll be particularly used, but it could definitely find its way into the Blaine deck in some way, shape, or form. Taurus is... I mean, I'm not a huge fan of this Taurus, but being colorless, it could be very good as a benchmon. If your opponent's Pokemon is an EX, it does an extra 80 damage. So this Taurus can deal 120 damage. Could actually be a very nice counter to the Aerodactyl we looked at. It can virtually one-shot Aerodactyl or very close to. Does 120. Aero has 140, but Taurus could actually make its way into a lot of decks as just like a backup mon on the bench, kind of like the inverse of Kangaskhan, whereas Kangaskhan's up front being a tank and dealing damage. Taurus could be in the back getting ready to take things out to sweep. So it could be a very interesting card. It doesn't look great on first glance, but the more I kind of think about it, the more I can actually see Taurus being quite useful. Now, I did mention I think Execute is a sleeper, and the reason being, if you actually look at this card closely, Growth Spurt is a colorless energy. Now, Growth Spurt allows you to take a grass energy from your energy zone and attach it to this Pokemon. If you think about the implication here, that means that you can run Execute, which is a 1 energy cost, and Executor, which is its evolution, is also a 1 energy cost in literally any deck, because the 1 energy you need comes from the ability or the attack of Execute. So you could run this Execute in a Charizard deck, in a Pikachu deck, in literally any deck in the game. You can now throw an Executor EX or a regular Executor in that deck, which is kind of insane. Imagine pairing Executor EX with some of the other EXs out there, which are quite good at dealing early game damage. Maybe we'll start seeing Executor and Starmie decks. Like, who knows, man? This card is definitely slept on. That being colorless is insane, and this makes Execute probably one of my picks for being the biggest sleeper in Mythical Island, man. Last but not least, let's talk about the new supporter cards. Now, there are some more basic... Last but not least, let's talk about the new supporter cards. There are some basic mons that I haven't talked about, but I don't believe they're worth talking about yet because we don't know anything about the evolutions, and the basic mons in isolation like Snivy or Morlow are just basic mons that deal damage, and there's nothing else beyond that to talk about. Now, Blue is probably the better of the two new supporters in my opinion. Blue is like a reverse Giovanni, so if you use Blue on your opponent's next turn, they deal 10 less damage. Now, this could be very clutch for needing to survive that one last turn in order to win the game. I think there's a lot of tactic and a lot of mind games which will start coming into play with Blue. No longer do you have to worry about Sabrina and Giovanni in isolation. You're now thinking about Blue. I think that's a very cool card and a nice addition to the game. Leaf is like, I can understand where this might be used. I think Leaf is going to be very niche. It's basically an X speed that gives you a retreat cost reduction of 2, but you got to think about this. In terms of the early game, you're going to be using your supporter turns on Brock, on Misty, on Oak. In terms of the late game, you're probably going to be trying to use your supporter turns on Giovanni and Sabrina, and even Brock in some scenarios. So I think that Leaf is less good. In some ways, I would rather just run 2 X speeds. I do understand it's like two retreat costs from the price of 1, but I still think supporters are quite valuable, and I think losing a supporter turn to Leaf is maybe not going to be good for like the 90% of decks. There are definitely going to be some decks which it's going to be great in, but I think on average, they're going to be quite bad. Now, there are plenty more cards we haven't looked at, but we don't really know anything about them. So we know there's going to be a Celebi card and a Pidgeot EX at the very least. We know there is probably going to be a couple more EXs. We would imagine there's over 80 cards in this set, or around about 80 cards. There's probably going to be some very cool cards in this set, which will totally change how we think about some of the current meta decks and how we look to form new meta decks. I am very, very excited about this set, and if we find out more, I will post another update video with some more ideas and commentary around the new cards. But until then, guys, if you enjoyed this quick video and recap of what we know so far and some of the current cards, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell for the next one, and goodbye from me and my cute little doggo. Take care.